and welcome to a new episode of PR360. And I'm your host, Brett Dicer. If you could please subscribe to PR360 on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music. Leave a 5-star review if you like this podcast, and let us know how we can help you better as always. But this week I have Jai with me, and she is she's a K beauty consultant. She also is a video marketing. She also has a video marketing agency called that basically is dedicated to rising Korean wave. Also co-founding just a bunch of different things in Korean beauty brands. So we've got very interesting podcast episode for you. But welcome to the show, Jai.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, and the first question I asked all my guests is: are you a coffee or tea drinker?
I'm a tea drinker. I don't like coffee at all. I love here in Korea, they have a lot of fruity drinks. It's not necessarily sweet, but they have a lot of those special fruits. And then same in Senegal, where I'm from originally. So a lot of
Nice.
hibiscus. Yeah.
Hey, I mean, that's great too. I mean, if you have all those natural teas, I mean, I can understand why you
Exactly.
would be a little bit. Got you. And then I gave a brief introduction about your expertise. Can you give our audience a little bit more about your expertise?
Sure. So here in Korea, we have a KWORLD Media agency, which is a digital marketing agency. We focus on video marketing. So primarily, what we do is we help Korean companies with their video content. It could be for social media. We do short form and long form content, and most of our clients are Korean beauty brands, essentially, which is really my passion. I'm a big fan of K beauty. That's what brought me to South Korea. And then on top of that, I do a lot of consulting in terms of Korean beauty.
Gotcha. And then, I mean, what are some things that PR pros that may not know about video marketing?
I think a lot of the things that might be disregarded is the concept of user generated content. It's a very, very big thing that should be always implemented somehow. And making the content more accessible. So that means that whenever you create some content for any type of brands, you want to really tell a story. And when you tell that story, it means that you want the consumers to relate to the brand. So that's when you can become more intimate, have a maybe something that tells the story of one of the employees or one of the founder or how the brand came to be. So it's very important to have a story to tell and repurposing your content in a smart way. So we have tons of social media today, too many maybe. So it's very important to not just make a content. Okay, we have a video, we're going to post it on Instagram, then we're going to post that same video on TikTok and that same video on YouTube and Facebook. So you have to repurpose the content in a smart way, meaning that the audience you're going to have on Instagram is not going to be the same you have on TikTok or YouTube or Facebook. So in that sense, the content needs to be adjusted and the message can be the same, but it can be delivered in a slightly different way.
Got you. And then, is there any tips for PR pros on getting that user generated content in video? Do you have any like tips or tricks to get more of it? Because I'm pretty sure a lot of us are like, we would love that, but sometimes it's kind of like I get nothing.
I think that one of the things that is maybe disregarded is video SEO, which is something that not everybody is kind of familiar with. I know we talk about of SEO in blogging, but video also has SEO and it's very important to implement. So that means that you want to make sure that, for example, when you do a YouTube video, the content that you're going to post on YouTube must have those keywords that you're going to be using, right? But they have to be reflected in the description, in the hashtag, in the title, and then that's when you make sure that your content kind of makes sense and like the algorithm is going to pick it up, understanding, okay, this content is about this something very specific that is mentioned. And then that's when the view starts.
All right. And are we seeing video as being content that is kind of what brands need to create now? Because I know for a while it was written word, it was pictures, and then video. But we're seeing just more just video being the de facto type of content that they should be producing.
Yeah, I think now we already saw that a lot of brands and company are implementing video content because they see, especially with social media, it's all like this digital marketing, this digital era that is telling us, okay, now we need to move on to video. And platform like TikTok, before it was YouTube, then even now it's Instagram. Instagram starting with posting, pictures, and then we got stories, and then we got lives. But now you have all this new way that is focused on reels, and the whole concept is kind of um, Instagram wants people to align with the concept of TikTok. And that's what we see in YouTube. We had the long term videos, and now we have the shorts. So video is the way to go today. So if any company or brand is not implementing 80% of their marketing with video, that's something that needs to be changed. Doesn't need to be a dramatic change, but it needs to be slowly implemented in the marketing strategy.
Gotcha. And then, I mean, even going off of that, how should PR pros create a strategy around short term and long form uh, video content? So we have TikTok and we have shorts, and then we have YouTube videos and everything else.
So when you create the video content between the long and the short form, you have to really assess what is your audience, because based on that, you're going to be able to create very uh, you're going to be able to create different type of content, meaning that if your audience is a very young audience, maybe that audience is more interesting in something more funny, more uplifting, maybe something that's more educational. Maybe you have another type of audience that is that wants to have really more detailed information. So based on that, that's how you can adjust the type of content. And obviously, depending on the platform you're going to use, also that's going to affect.
Gotcha. And then for PR pros, how do you create like that compelling video? I mean, you've talked about different categories. Is there other things that they should consider? Maybe different types of equipment, maybe actually like storyboarding or writing a script or something like that. Like, how do they create that compelling thing that people want to watch?
So there are two things to keep in mind. The first thing is going to be viral content. And when you want to do that, you need to stay on top of trends, which is kind of hard because there are so many things going on in so many different industry. But one example that I just want to mention, for example, that was very interesting when it came out, was the whole trend that happened with Squid Game, that Korean game, the Korean drama movie. So whenever that came out, we saw all those design. Remember that the triangle, the square, the circle. So a lot of brand use that content to create games within their video content, or creating animation, or creating something more interactive. So that's one of the first thing that you can implement. So see what's really kind of trending, viral, and make it work for your brand. It doesn't mean like you're taking it and then you just a copy and paste, but see how you can implement that in your brand. And then the next thing is, whenever you create a new video content, it's very important to have something, a story. Like I said, very have a story from beginning to end. So you want to take people on a journey, and that's when you have to have the whole layout of um, the idea, the brainstorming session, where you're gonna be right scribbling ideas, have a storyboard like you mentioned with your teams, and then see how you can create something that will make sense at the end. You just don't want to do a video just to make a video. You want to tell something.
Gotcha. And then moving on to more influencer marketing, are we going to be seeing like more employee influencer marketing with all this stuff? I know we do have a lot more outbound influencer marketing, but are you starting to see more of a shift to looking at your own employees, maybe trying to make them more influencer within the company?
I think we're going to see more influencers, but we have to be careful when we what about the term employee influencer, employee, because what works these days with the influencer is the idea that people can relate to them and that they are detached from the brand. So if we see this concept of having influencer employee where brands are employing them and they are really a part of the brand, it kind of defeats the purpose somehow. So now for PR agency, that's going to be a different thing, because when you select your influencer, you're going to make sure that the influencer have specific values that kind of align with the PR agency, pretty much, because you want to make sure, like, whenever you're going to have them collaborate with the brand, it kind of makes sense.
Gotcha. And then, are there any tips for PR pros to actually pitch to influencer? Because creating a list is like half the battle. Is the next part is actually pitching it.
I think like what's really important, and we did some influencer marketing, and from my experience, that's very important when we work with brands and influencer together. It's really understanding the branding of the brand, and understanding the branding of the influencer, and make sure that they match, because you don't want to have somebody that's not going to reflect your brand in a positive way, and you want people to relate to your brand through the influencers, and that means that you guys need to have somehow the same values. So if, for example, you're going to be working with you're a clean beauty vegan brand and you're working with an influencer that's not necessarily very focused on this aspect of having very specific type of beauty content, and kind of talks about any type of beauty product, the alignment is not 100% there, versus if I'm taking like maybe a vegan oriented influencer that is very focused on natural ingredients, then that aligns 100%. And then when you work together, then the community of that influencer totally feels comfortable, because they know that their influencer is already in that concept.
Mm. All right. And do you think Web3 will actually have a positive impact, or it will have any impact on more influencer marketing? Because we've keep on hearing about Web3 and how it's going to revolutionize the web and everything, or supposedly revolutionize the web, I should say. So is this going to like completely change influencer marketing, or it's just going to be another wait and see?
I think it will. I don't know yet how good or bad it will be, to be honest, because we've seen it where it's going to be a great opportunity for influencers in terms of rights of their content. It's going to be, everything is going to be more based on blockchain. It's going to be more, decentralization, and more, there will be more trust, at least at that level. The other side of it is that we don't know how far that Web3 is going to go in terms of using virtual influencer, because we're starting seeing that way more. So if that keeps going that way, then that will affect the current influencers, because if brands think that it makes more sense for them to start using virtual influencers, then what's going to happen to the real life influencers?
Got you. And so it may even be, and this is more a little bit more of a hypothetical, it may be virtual influencers and real life
But
influencers, and you split them
it's
off.
really, that's what it's going to be. So, here in Korea, we see a lot of those, because, Korea is very advanced in terms of anything like, digital. So we see a lot of these virtual influencers getting more and more popular. And I found it's very fascinating to see that people actually would actually follow these influencers and feel like they feel a connection to them, even though they're not real. So, but that says a lot on what are the possibilities moving forward.
Could this also be region specific? Let's say the Asian market really likes the artificial influencer, the virtual influencer, and the West, or maybe portions of the West, are like kind of like, I really don't know about this. Like, will there be a dichotomy of that?
I think there will be definitely a gap between how we're using it here and then how it's going to start affecting the west side. So 100%, because I mean we've seen those AI influencers, VR influencers, a couple of years ago, and they started getting more popular overseas too. So I can see how eventually, in the US, we might see more company or testing it and see what is the response. And I think that's when we're gonna realize if okay, this can work globally or if it's just something specific per regions.
Got you. And then when doing the research for influencers, should PR pros really focus on their interaction with the community? Because even in Web3, everything's about community. So the future is all about community. And so should we be really focusing on the actual interactions and seeing what they do more than just how many followers they have?
Yes. I always tell the brands influence the number of influencers is not the number of followers is not important really, because I've seen so many cases where we see people with 100,000 followers and then the engagement is so low. It's just pointless, to be honest, to work with these influencers. So I'd rather have somebody that has 5,000 followers and has at least, like, maybe like a post has 100 likes and 20 comments. This is more relevant, this is more important than having tons of followers with no interaction, no engagement, because in the end that collaboration is not going to be successful because you're not going to have any turnover.
Gotcha. And I mean, with this, will even the stats change with, like you said, the virtual influencers versus the real life influencers? When we all have to like figure out analytical stats for VR now and figure out like how many virtual people follow this person or something like that?
Yes, we will, because it's going to be a different demographic, number one, and I think it's going to be using different type of we're going to need new tools obviously for this. So that means that the results is going to be very different. So and the platform will be different. So 100% we're going to have to separate the two.
Gotcha. And for influencers, like we were talking about everything, should NFTs be brought into the picture as well with the virtual influencers, and maybe the brands itself should, for makeup, for you to have specific NFTs for beauty brands and everything with the influencers, or should brands right now stay away from the NFTs specifically and just focus on the influencing?
I think it really depends on which industry you are working in. I think for beauty, it's a little bit more tricky. It's trickier because we know about the whole environmental thing with NFTs. So, if we're going with the beauty industry, we're going towards this trend of, being very clean beauty, ecology. So, it kind of contradicts in a way if we are moving into this NFT zone. But I could see how, all the industry can, I can totally see that happening. But in the beauty industry, I can see brand using it, but they have to be very careful in how they approach it.
All right. And fun question for you. As a kid, what did you want to be when you grow up?
I wanted to be an interpreter. So I loved anything related to. I wanted to work for the UN or something like that and travel the world. And I had a big love for languages, so that was my initial thing. But I feel like somehow I kind of did that because I studied so many languages and I lived in New York. Now I'm living in Korea, so it kind of aligned somehow.
They all worked out in the end, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Any final thoughts for listeners?
I think that um, we all agree that video marketing is going to be the next thing. That couple years ago, long time ago, when internet came out, nobody believe that it would be what it is today. When YouTube came out, nobody believed it would be what it is today. So I think everybody needs to keep in mind that the content that is going to be the most important and the most converting for brands is the video one. And there is no rules in terms of what is okay to do and what's not okay to do. Video content is very broad in terms of what you can do in terms of creativity. And you can use very complex equipment to very simple thing like a phone to create video content. So there is no restriction in terms of content creation. Of course, the key is going to be how you will put it together, how you will tell the story, how you would put the idea together, and how you're going to deliver the message. And in terms of influencers, I think we need to kind of wait and see what's going to be happening in the virtual world. But I think everybody should keep an eye on it.
Nice. Well, thank you for joining PR360 and sharing your knowledge about videos and video marketing and influencer marketing.
Thank you so much for having me, Brett.
And thank you for joining PR360. As always, please subscribe to PR360 on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music. Leave a 5-star review if you like this podcast, and let us know how we can do better for you. And join us next week as we talk to another great thought leader in the PR industry. All right, guys, stay safe. Get to understanding your video SEO and your influencer marketing. And see you next week. Later.